Admit It, The Strange Tale of Depsey the Rabbit. Chapter 5. Detective Bones, The First Case. The fluorescent lights buzzed with the same tired persistence they'd maintained for 40 years, casting everything in the Cartoon City police station in that particular shade of institutional white that made even the most colorful cartoon characters look slightly gray. Detective Potato Bones sat at his desk, methodically working through his breakfast of what appeared to be cornflakes, though the crunching sounds they made against his skeletal jaw suggested they might have been something considerably less organic. Crunch, crunch. The morning ritual never varied. Coffee gone cold an hour ago, stack of overnight reports waiting for their rubber stamp of dismissal, and the comfortable certainty that today would bring nothing more challenging than paperwork, and the occasional family looking for someone who'd clearly just moved on to better opportunities. Detective Potato Bones was a thin skeleton, all sharp angles and economical movement, with the kind of weary efficiency that came from 4 decades of police work in a world where the worst crimes were usually pie theft and the occasional anvil assault. His badge, slightly tarnished but still properly pinned, read Detective P. Bones, in letters that had seen better decades. Crunch, crunch. Missing cartoon, case number 47B, he muttered to himself, reading the report without really seeing it. Benny Balloon, last seen 3 weeks ago. He reached for his rubber stamp, the one that read Routine Disappearance, File and Forget, and brought it down with practiced authority. Probably found work with a traveling circus. The file slid into the overflowing drawer marked Standard Departures, with the soft whisper of paper joining paper. 40 years' worth of missing cartoon reports lived in those drawers, sorted by decade and bound with rubber bands that had long since lost their elasticity. Crunch, crunch. Missing cartoon, case number 48B, Violet Vine, Nature Program hostess. Disappeared 6 weeks ago. Another stamp, another file sliding home. Better opportunities in the countryside. They always find their way. From her position at the switchboard in the corner, Operator Pearl, a small, efficient-looking cartoon telephone with arms, legs, and a distinctly professional demeanor, watched the morning routine with the kind of polite attention that came from witnessing the same scene every day for the past 15 years. Her earpiece gleamed with the kind of meticulous care that suggested she took her communication responsibilities seriously, and her notepad was filled with the precise handwriting of someone who believed that proper message-taking was a noble art form. Detective Bones, Pearl said in her crisp, operator-trained voice, you have 3 more reports from the overnight dispatcher. Shall I connect the callers for follow-up, or would you prefer written statements? Crunch, crunch. Written statements are fine, Pearl. You know how it is. People get emotional about these things. Better to let them process their feelings on paper first. He gestured vaguely toward the towering file cabinets that dominated the station's back wall. 40 years on the force, I've learned that these cases resolve themselves given time. Cartoons are resilient. They find their paths. Pearl nodded with professional understanding, though something in her expression suggested she'd been taking more detailed notes about the missing cartoon calls lately. Her switchboard, with its maze of cords and blinking lights, connected her to every corner of the cartoon world, and she'd begun to notice patterns in the voices of families calling about missing loved ones. Not that anyone had asked for her observations, of course. The morning settled into its familiar rhythm. Reports arrived, stamps descended, files disappeared into the bureaucratic maze that had absorbed 4 decades of cartoon disappearances. Detective Bones had perfected the art of compassionate dismissal. Just enough concern to seem professional, just enough certainty to discourage follow-up questions. Crunch, crunch. Missing cartoon, case number 49B. Tommy Teapot, variety performer. Been gone 5 weeks now. Stamp. File. probably touring with the dinner theatre circuit. The system worked because it had to work. Cartoon City was a transient place where performers moved between traveling shows, seasonal productions, and permanent relocations to pursue bigger dreams. The missing person reports were mostly worried families who hadn't yet accepted that their loved ones had simply moved on to better opportunities elsewhere. At least that's what Detective Bones told himself every morning for 40 years. Crunch, crunch. The front door of the station burst open with enough force to rattle the windows, though not quite enough to actually break anything. Cartoon architecture was built to withstand considerably more dramatic entrances than that. But what made Detective Bones look up from his breakfast wasn't the noise. It was the organization. 6 cartoon characters filed in with the kind of purposeful coordination that spoke of planning, preparation, and shared determination. They moved like a delegation rather than individual complainants, carrying folders, photographs, and what appeared to be a hand-drawn timeline spread across multiple pieces of poster board. Leading the group was a stern-looking cartoon teacup, not unlike Lucy Teacup, but with chips along her rim and a no-nonsense golden handle that had clearly seen years of practical use. Behind her came a nervous balloon animal, a wilted sunflower wearing a small hat, a well-dressed salt shaker, a tired-looking cartoon pencil, and bringing up the rear, a small cartoon music note who hummed quietly to herself as she organized a thick folder of documentation. "Detective Bones?" the lead teacup announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd organized church fundraisers and neighborhood improvement committees. "We need answers. This has been going on for far too long, and we've done our homework." Crunch, crunch. Detective Bones set down his spoon with deliberate calm, reaching for the stack of Form 27B missing person reports from his desk drawer. 40 years of experience had taught him that organized groups required more finesse than individual complainants, but the end result was always the same. Now, let's not get dramatic," he said with professional patience. "I understand you're concerned about someone, but we have procedures. People move away, find new opportunities." He gestured toward the massive filing cabinets. "In my experience, these situations usually resolve themselves given proper time." "Time," the balloon animal squeaked, his latex surface flushing with indignation. "Detective, my brother Benny disappeared 5 weeks ago. He was so excited about some medical treatment, then just gone." "And my cousin Violet," added the sunflower, her petals drooping with worry. "Been missing 6 weeks now. Same story, went to some enhancement doctor, seemed happy about it for a while, then vanished." The teacup leader stepped forward, spreading her poster board timeline across Detective Bones's desk with the efficiency of someone presenting evidence to a jury. "Detective, we've been comparing notes. This isn't about individual disappearances anymore. This is a pattern." Crunch. Crunch. Detective Bones's chewing slowed as he found himself actually looking at what they'd spread before him. The timeline was meticulously hand-drawn, with dates, names, and connecting lines that showed relationships between missing cartoons. It stretched back not just weeks or months, but years, decades. "Here," the teacup continued, pointing to the far left of her timeline with a gold-plated pointer that suggested she'd been a teacher before retirement. "Joko Raccoon disappeared 40 years ago. Then here." She moved the pointer to a point roughly 20 years later. "Mr. Muffins, the sweetest little baking cartoon you ever met. Both cases filed as routine departures." "Well," Detective Bones said, his voice taking on the weary tone of someone explaining obvious facts to well-meaning amateurs. "Who knows what was going on back in Muffin's day, or with Joko? That's like wondering about cave cartoons. Ancient history. The cartoon world was different then." "But it's not ancient history," interrupted the salt shaker. producing a folder thick with documentation. Because it never stopped. Look at these recent cases. All of them saw the same doctor for enhancement treatments weeks before disappearing. The music note in the back hummed a nervous little tune while organizing photographs. Dr. Dinglegreen, she sang softly. Every single one of them mentioned Dr. Dinglegreen. Crunch. Detective Bones paused mid-bite, a piece of cornflake hanging from his skeletal jaw. A doctor? Enhancement specialist, the teacup said with the satisfaction of someone presenting crucial evidence. Tall cartoon possum, very professional looking, sharp teeth, surgical coat. He promises to help cartoons with confidence, energy, performance improvements. The balloon animal nodded vigorously. My brother Benny was thrilled after his appointment. Said Dr. Dinglegreen had given him some kind of treatment to help with his stage presence. He seemed different for a few weeks, more energetic, more confident. Then he started acting strange, asking weird questions about his treatment, and then gone. Same with Violet, the sunflower added sadly. She was so excited about her enhancement. Said she felt amazing for the first month. Then she got worried, said something felt wrong, wanted to go back and ask the doctor questions. That's when she disappeared. Detective Bones set down his spoon entirely, studying the timeline with growing unease. The pattern was more complex than simple disappearances. There was a gap between treatment and vanishing, a period where the victims seemed to live normally before something went wrong. Now look, he said, falling back on institutional authority. People seek medical help all the time, and if they were feeling better for weeks afterward, that sounds like successful treatment. Maybe they just moved on to pursue new opportunities. Enhancement treatments can give people confidence to make big life changes. 6 weeks later, the pencil asked sharply, speaking for the first time. His voice had the precise diction of someone who'd spent years correcting grammar. All of them, all deciding to abandon their lives exactly when they started asking questions about their treatments. Pearl, from her switchboard position, cleared her throat delicately. Detective Bones, if I may, I've been receiving calls about Dr. Dinglegreen for months now. Always the same pattern. Families saying their loved ones got enhancement treatments, seemed fine for weeks, then vanished when they started having concerns about side effects. But 40 years of crowd control kicked in automatically. Detective Bones straightened in his chair, projecting the calm authority that had served him through countless family confrontations. I understand you're all worried, he said, reaching for his stack of Form 27B reports with practiced efficiency. But we have procedures for good reasons. Each missing person needs to be filed individually, with proper documentation, following a mandatory 48-hour waiting period to allow for natural resolution. He began distributing forms with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times. Fill out one form per missing individual, include all relevant details about their last known whereabouts, and we'll begin our standard investigation protocol. But the pattern, the teacup began. Coincidence, not conspiracy. Detective Bones replied smoothly. Dr. Dinglegreen sounds like a popular enhancement specialist. Successful treatments give people confidence to pursue bigger opportunities. The timing probably seems connected, because successful people tend to make major life changes around the same time frame. It was masterful bureaucratic deflection, honed by 40 years of practice. Create paperwork delays, invoke proper procedures, project institutional wisdom, and send worried families away with the comforting illusion that their concerns were being addressed through official channels. The families gathered their timeline, photographs, and documentation with obvious disappointment, but grudging acceptance of official authority. Forms were distributed, procedures explained, and promises made about proper investigation following appropriate waiting periods. "Remember," Detective Bones said as they prepared to leave, "most missing person cases resolve themselves naturally. These cartoons probably found exactly what they were looking for. New confidence, new opportunities, new lives. They just haven't had time to contact family yet." As the families filed out, still clutching their forms and their organized evidence, Detective Bones felt the familiar satisfaction of a crisis successfully managed. 40 years of experience had taught him that emotional families needed patience and proper procedures, not dramatic investigations of coincidental patterns. Crunch, crunch. He returned to his breakfast and his morning reports, ready to resume the comfortable routine that had served him well for 4 decades. The pattern the families had presented was interesting, but easily explained by normal human behavior after successful medical treatment. Pearl, however, continued watching the door long after the families had left, her expression thoughtful. She'd taken detailed notes during the confrontation, and something about the organized nature of their evidence troubled her professional instincts. "Detective Bones," she said carefully, "should I flag any future calls about Dr. Dinglegreen for special attention?" Crunch, crunch. "Just standard procedure, Pearl. Take messages, direct them to proper forms, follow the usual protocols." He gestured toward his filing cabinets with casual authority. 40 years on the force teaches you that most mysteries aren't mysterious. They're just incomplete information waiting for natural resolution. The morning settled back into its familiar rhythm. Reports arrived, stamps descended, files disappeared into their proper drawers. Detective Bones had successfully converted a potential crisis into manageable paperwork, maintaining the institutional order that kept Cartoon City's police operations running smoothly. Everything was perfectly normal, until the phone rang. Pearl's voice carried across the station with the crisp efficiency that made her such an excellent switchboard operator. "Detective Bones, you have a call from Mabel Bones on line 2. Shall I put her through?" Detective Bones looked up from his paperwork, a piece of cornflake pausing halfway to his mouth. Aunt Mabel never called him at work. Their family was strict about maintaining proper boundaries between professional and personal life. "Put her through, Pearl." The connection clicked with the satisfying precision of professional telephone equipment. Aunt Mabel's voice came through clearly, though she sounded uncharacteristically hesitant. "Potato, dear, I'm terribly sorry to bother you at work." Aunt Mabel was a pleasantly round skeleton, where Detective Bones was all sharp angles and efficient movement. She was soft curves and comfortable presence. They'd maintained their weekly Sunday dinner tradition for 30 years, ever since Uncle Mortimer had retired from his job as a cartoon security guard. He was the kind of jolly, portly skeleton who brought flowers to every family gathering and never forgot a birthday. "What's wrong, Aunt Mabel? You never call during work hours." "Well, that's just it, dear. It's about Uncle Mortimer." Her voice carried the kind of worried confusion that came from having her comfortable world suddenly become unreliable. "He's been missing for 2 weeks now. He never misses our Sunday dinners, Potato. Not in 30 years. Detective Bones felt a small chill, but maintained his professional demeanor. 2 weeks? That's unusual for Uncle Mort. When did you last see him? Well, that's the strange thing. About 6 weeks ago, he went to see some doctor about feeling more energetic. Said he was tired of slowing down, wanted to feel spry again. Aunt Mabel's voice took on a confused tone. The treatment seemed to work wonderfully at first. He was like a young skeleton again, full of energy, taking up hobbies, talking about big plans. The family's timeline flashed through Detective Bones's mind, but he pushed the thought away. That sounds positive, Aunt Mabel. Medical treatments can be very effective. Oh, it was. For about a month, he was the happiest I'd seen him in years. But then her voice wavered. He started getting worried about side effects. Said he was having strange dreams, feeling different than himself. He wanted to go back to the doctor and ask questions. Detective Bones set down his spoon, the cornflakes suddenly tasteless in his mouth. And that's when he disappeared. The very next day after he decided to contact the doctor again, 2 weeks ago now, just gone. Aunt Mabel's voice carried decades of confusion and worry. I thought maybe he'd found some wonderful new opportunity, but he would never leave without telling me. Never. The cold certainty began spreading through Detective Bones's chest, though he tried to maintain his professional calm. What was this doctor's name, Aunt Mabel? Oh, Uncle Mortimer was so impressed with him. Dr. Dinglegreen, I think. Such a professional fellow, very tall, wore a spotless surgical coat. Uncle Mort said he specialized in enhancement procedures for elderly cartoons. The timeline the families had spread across his desk seemed to materialize in Detective Bones's mind with horrible clarity. Uncle Mortimer, sweet, trusting Uncle Mortimer who brought flowers to Sunday dinner, fit the pattern exactly. Enhancement consultation, weeks of apparent success, questions about side effects, sudden disappearance. Aunt Mabel, Detective Bones said, his voice carefully controlled. I'm going to look into this personally. Don't file any reports yet. Let me handle this through official channels. Oh, thank you, dear. I knew you'd know what to do. After hanging up, Detective Bones sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the stack of missing person reports he'd been stamping all morning. Each one now seemed to carry Uncle Mortimer's face, Uncle Mortimer's trusting nature, Uncle Mortimer's faith in professional medical care. But this was probably just coincidence. The families had been emotional, seeing patterns where none existed. Uncle Mortimer had probably just found new confidence and new opportunities after successful treatment. The timing was unfortunate, but hardly sinister. Pearl, he said, trying to sound casual, could you pull any records we have on this Dr. Dinglegreen? Just routine background check. Pearl's professional efficiency kicked in immediately. Of course, Detective. Medical Licensing Board, business registration, professional credentials. All of it. And Pearl, you mentioned keeping detailed notes about the calls. Could I see those? She produced her notebook with obvious satisfaction. Pages of precise handwriting documenting every call about missing cartoons, organized by date and cross-referenced by common elements. Dr. Dinglegreen appears in 47 separate missing person calls over the past 6 months, Pearl said, consulting her records. Always the same pattern. Enhancement treatment, period of apparent success, questions about side effects, then disappearance. 47 cases in 6 months. And Detective, Pearl continued, I took the liberty of calling the Medical Licensing Board yesterday. They're pulling Dr. Dinglegreen's complete file for us. Within an hour, the medical board delivered a thick folder that made Detective Bones's blood run cold. Not because it was empty, but because it was impossibly complete. Dr. Dinglegreen's medical license had been issued about 200 years ago. 200 years ago. The file contained decades of renewal documentation, continuing education certificates, and professional references spanning 2 centuries. Photos from different eras showed the same tall possum with the same sharp teeth, wearing surgical coats that evolved with medical fashion, but never aging, never changing. This has to be a filing error, Detective Bones said, staring at a daguerreotype from 186 years ago that showed Dr. Dinglegreen performing what appeared to be enhancement surgery on a primitive cartoon character. Some kind of administrative mistake. Maybe a family practice, father to son, using the same name. But the signatures were identical across 200 years. The handwriting never changed. The photographs showed no aging, No variation. Just the same sharp-toothed possum offering enhancement procedures to cartoon characters across multiple centuries. Pearl peered over his shoulder at the documentation. Detective, look at this complaint filed 163 years ago. Patients initially pleased with treatments, then developing concerns about side effects before disappearing entirely. It's the exact same pattern as today. Detective Bones found himself staring at complaint after complaint, spanning decades, all describing the same sequence: enhancement, apparent success, growing concerns, sudden disappearance. The files showed that Dr. Dinglegreen had been operating continuously for 200 years, using the same methods, targeting the same types of vulnerable cartoons, with the same mysterious results. "This can't be right," he said weakly, but the evidence was undeniable. Medical licenses don't work this way. People don't live this long. Files don't go back this far without gaps. "Detective," Pearl said quietly, "what if the filing isn't wrong? What if Dr. Dinglegreen really has been doing this for 200 years? The thought hit him like a physical blow. Not just Uncle Mortimer, not just the 47 recent cases Pearl had documented. 2 centuries of cartoon characters seeking enhancement, finding temporary success, asking questions, and disappearing into whatever system Dr. Dinglegreen represented. And for 40 years, Detective Bones had been stamping their cases as routine disappearances and filing them away without investigation. "How many?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Pearl, in all your records, across all the calls you've taken, how many families have asked about missing relatives who saw Dr. Dinglegreen?" Pearl consulted her notes with growing horror. "In just the 15 years I've been working here, over 300 documented cases, all following the same pattern. All filed as routine disappearances." Detective Bones pulled out drawer after drawer of missing person files, spreading them across his desk in chronological order. Decades of reports, all dismissed with rubber stamps, all describing the same sequence of events: enhancement consultation, apparent success, growing concerns, mysterious disappearance. The horrible mathematics became undeniable. If Dr. Dinglegreen had been operating for over 200 years, and Pearl had documented 300 cases in just 15 years, then thousands of cartoon characters had been consumed by whatever system he represented. Thousands of Uncle Mortimers, all trusting professional medical care, all disappearing when they asked too many questions about their treatments. "We enabled this," Detective Bones said, staring at the evidence spread across his desk. 40 years of routine filing, 40 years of avoiding investigation, 40 years of giving this system exactly the bureaucratic cover it needed to operate. Pearl nodded grimly. "Every family that called, every pattern we dismissed, every form we filed instead of investigating, we made it possible." For the first time in 40 years, Detective Bones understood that his comfortable institutional routine hadn't been protecting the community from unnecessary drama. It had been protecting an ancient predatory system from exposure and accountability. Uncle Mortimer was somewhere in that system. And Detective Bones finally understood that finding him would require confronting 2 centuries of institutional failure that he had personally helped maintain. "No more forms," Detective Bones said, standing up from his desk with grim determination. "No more waiting periods. Time to find out what Dr. Dinglegreen has been doing to our people for 200 years. Pearl organized her notes with professional efficiency. "Where do we start, Detective?" "With the one place that keeps appearing in these reports," Detective Bones said, studying the documentation. "Several of the recent missing cartoons worked at the Blame It on the Ink Playhouse. Time to find out what connects that place to Dr. Dinglegreen's operation." As they prepared to leave, Detective Bones took one last look at the evidence that covered his desk. 2 centuries of missing cartoon reports, all following the same pattern, all dismissed by decades of institutional indifference. Uncle Mortimer's cheerful face smiled at him from the family photograph on his desk. Round and trusting and completely unaware that his faith in professional medical care had led him into a system that had been consuming cartoon characters since before the modern cartoon world existed. Pearl, we're going to need help. This is bigger than 2 investigators can handle. What kind of help, Detective? Detective Bones looked at the files one more time, understanding finally that they were confronting not just a medical fraud, but an ancient system of predation that had been hiding behind legitimate institutions for 2 centuries. The kind that knows how these disappearances actually work. The kind that might understand what Dr. Dinglegreen is really doing with his enhancement treatments. For the first time in 4 decades, Detective Bones was ready to investigate rather than dismiss the truth about missing cartoons. But he had the terrible feeling that the truth was far worse than even the organized families had suspected.